I'm so glad to be back with another episode of In Depth with Dion, and I got Baron from Oklahoma Tenants Union with me in the house. How you doing today?
I'm doing good. I'm doing good.
All
Yeah,
right. I know
thanks
we've
for
been
coming.
trying to get this scheduled from the top of the year, and I'm
Hmm.
glad that we've got it going. There's a lot of work, impactful work that the organization does, and I would love for more people to understand and maybe even get involved.
Yeah, yeah. Well, thanks again for even giving us the invite. This is my first time doing a recorded interview. Hopefully, we'll get some good information for people to know about. Yeah, we're at a good place for people to be joining now. I
Mm.
mean, obviously, like there's a lot going on with housing right now. A lot of buy up of properties, increasing rents. You know, there's a lot of strain on cost of living these days. So
Hmm.
plenty of need for tenants to be organizing, or plenty of issues to be confronted. We need all the help we can get.
Absolutely, especially in a state like Oklahoma, where I believe we are in the top 10, maybe the sixth highest eviction rate in the country,
Yep.
and we have one of the shortest eviction
Uh
windows
huh. That's
in the
right.
country.
Yeah, it's intense, and we have a regulatory structure around the mainly the Landlord Tenant Act that is the bones of it were really built out in the 30s, improved in the 70s after some public housing strikes after
Mm.
Nixon was increasingly defunding HUD. And we've only seen a couple of improvements since then, especially since COVID. But none of it meets what's needed,
Mm.
at least on a regulatory basis.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I want to ground this conversation in the historical context for a lot of people who
Hmm.
don't know the history
Hmm.
around organizing in Oklahoma.
Yeah.
We see Oklahoma as this ultra conservative state today, which its politics are led
Hmm.
that way, but it masks the more complex history and the complex dynamics of today.
Yeah.
There's a lot of people from different backgrounds, different ideologies who make this state home,
Yeah.
and there's a lot of progressive people here as well. So, many people don't know that Oklahoma, which is arguably the most conservative state in terms of voting for Trump, we were, I believe, the only state to
Every county.
have every county, a
Yeah.
majority of voters select Trump
Yeah.
twice. But there was once a strong socialist presence here, perhaps more so than any other state. And the
Hmm.
power was birthed out of the struggle of tenant farmers who wanted to actually abolish. You're looking at me.
No, go ahead. Sorry,
Oh,
I was just
Camera.
yeah, yeah.
oh, okay.
You were just a little closer than he was. So
It's
I
good.
want to I want to redo that part
all
anyway.
right.
But many people don't know that Oklahoma, which is arguably the most conservative state in terms of voting for Trump, majority of all 77 counties twice voted for Trump. But there was once a strong socialist presence here,
Hmm.
birthed out of the power of the struggle of tenant farmers who
Yeah.
wanted to actually, you know, uh, create better housing opportunities, education
Yeah.
programs, and in some cases abolish landlords entirely,
That's right.
according to the Oklahoma Historical Society.
Yeah.
So, my question to you is, what is your role today with Oklahoma Tenants Union,
Right.
and what is the mission of OTU?
Yeah. So, yeah, that's great. I mean, I think the history, sometimes people have this conception that historic progressivism, the levels of like political activity of like the working class and like working people in Oklahoma is it's a statue, it's dead, it's not actually like present in like our lived reality, but it's still here. It's just it's not as organized, and so
Mm-hmm.
that's why it's different. I mean, that really is like a big motivation for why we exist. Uh, we originally got formed in 2019 as a advocacy group of like a network of activists, mostly in Oklahoma City and Midwest City, dealing with tenants facing eviction. And we really just took like three main strategies of either fundraising to help with back rent, which is pretty common cause for evictions these days. But then also doing court support if we can, or connecting tenants with legal support through example legal aid services of Oklahoma, or just helping them move out. And what we came to see was that that's really not it's a band-aid. It does
Mm-hmm.
not get to the fundamental problem, which is that evictions are systematically baked into the business model of housing. It's typically in a year-to-year evaluation of most property management companies, they are figuring out, are we evicting at a frequent enough rate to have a consistent turnover of tenants to maintain a sustained revenue stream
Wow.
from year to year.
Excuse me?
Well, as you'd imagine, if a tenant's staying in a property for a long time
Mm.
and they're building a relationship with a property manager, that sets some complications in front of what should be just a lease agreement where they're paying month in, month out, no excuses. And say they get to be friends with the property manager, that becomes an issue of where the property manager is not really um, unbiased in their rent seeking. And so they might let a tenant not pay rent for 3 months and eventually pay it back. And so, at the end of the day, it's a business.
Mm-hmm.
Housing is not meant or structured in American society as providing homes for people. It's a revenue stream, especially in the private market. I think it's probably more of a mixed bag with public housing today, but that's increasingly less and less a proportion of the housing stock.
Less and less funding for it as
Yeah.
well.
Yeah. I mean, we've seen this firsthand in Oklahoma City actually recently, but you know, from the beginning, the big picture for us was that tenants deserve better housing.
Mm-hmm.
They deserve to have more control over it. Because that's what people need to have a good life. If you don't control your housing, you don't have the ability to settle down. You have too much volatility in your life. It's hard to socialize with neighbors and have a community around you if you're constantly moving from place to place. And hopefully through our organization, we're able to give tenants a level of collective agency to deal with those problems, and not just protect themselves from the excesses of this housing market, whether that be slumlords, overinflation of rents from year to year,
Mm-hmm.
or very very substandard habitability conditions, but also just like the general market. I mean, more and more of the stock market is reliant upon real estate investment trusts. We know that more and more retirees are relying upon direct ownership of properties to cover their retirement years through rents, and the people who pay for that are tenants. It comes out of their wages. It's a direct through line between what you get paid at work as a tenant and how much your landlord is making at the end of the day. And oftentimes you're the first person to be squeezed before anything else, before maintenance, before the banks, obviously, that are running these mortgages. Tenants bear the brunt of pretty much every social issue here in America in a very intersectional way. And housing is the very front of that.
I'm curious. In your work with OTU, Oklahoma Tenants Union, what are some of the most horrific stories that you've heard?
Gosh, that's a good one. Well, I've seen some firsthand. There was a apartment complex in Oklahoma City early on in our years. We founded as an activist group around just supporting tenants individually. We made a pivot in 2021 to like formal collective organizing, trying to form tenant associations where tenants are doing stuff at like a committee level, connecting with their neighbors and doing things, in unison rather than on their own individually. One of our early campaigns in OKC, we saw
I'm sorry.
a unit where it had been vacant for, I believe, 6 months, where algae was growing on the interior of the windows of the unit
What?
because of leaks within the plumbing systems. It was a two-story building, and so you have a lot of water lines running on that ceiling and just dripping through. There was mold in corners, and it was just an insane situation. And come to find out through canvassing the building, we saw that like actually every single unit had mold in it, and there were a couple of tenants who had hospitalizations of children, prolonged exits, staying with family to avoid coming back, and the only thing that really can be rectified in those situations is like an intensive building level remediation of those systems. It's not like you got cockroaches in like one corner. It's in every wall, and those kinds of things we see all the time.
Hold that thought.
Yeah.
Had to get this out. Oh Lord, that
Yeah, I'm ready.
allergy season.
I hear you. I just had a huge buildup of congestion for the last couple weeks, so I'm like just getting over it.
I hear Jesse sniffling too.
Yeah. I'm just getting over something. Hold on.
Look, this is
Yeah.
natural. This is real life, y'all. This is We're trying to breathe over here.
Spring in Oklahoma, baby.
Yeah. I'm trying to think if I've got another one that's good.
It's wild.
Oh yeah, I got a good one.
Yeah, what you got?
The other case that we had, which was on one of our longer campaigns where we were able to actually successfully form a tenant association of the building. They had this is in West OKC. They had security fences that were busted through or rotted out for years, and there were repeated cases of stray dogs either attacking kids or killing pets at the complex. Um, and the way that management dealt with it was they just put rat poison at like the holes of the fences. It never ended up killing any of the pets at the property, but it obviously didn't like stop the dogs. They've got better things to feast on than rat poison. But yeah, I mean it's kind of the thing that I've learned over the years of organizing with OTU is that whenever you see those kinds of problems, it is at the very end that it becomes really obvious, but typically there's years building up to it where those problems are still present. It's just a little bit more subtle or lower frequency, a little less intense. But it always comes back to the same problem, which is dereliction or neglect. When you run a property, you don't own the property outright, and you've got to, cover your mortgage, cover your payments to property management, cover maintenance. You'll find any excuse in the book to avoid keeping up with the maintenance of a complex because ultimately that is coming directly out of your pocket.
Now, state law, doesn't state law have, I want to get into that, and I have a question about some
Yeah.
legislation that is still in the process of being voted
In
on.
committee, I think.
Yes.
Yeah, yeah.
But current state law, can you give a summary of what protections,
Tenants
if
have.
any,
Yeah.
right now?
Right. Well, that I think the kind of with in line with what I was saying earlier about how the regulatory structure is very outdated. One of the things that is I think was at one point a liberatory idea in Oklahoma in its early years that you could sign a contract, turn of the century, and that provides you, a legal footing that's equivalent to your employer, your landlord. That isn't actually really how things work then or now, but it's still the case. The protections that tenants have are entirely individualized. If you want to do a deduction on your rent to cover a maintenance item that's not being addressed by your landlord, you got to issue a certified mail. After 14 days, you don't get a response. Then you can go out, cover it, get a receipt, and deduct that cost from your rent. That got updated, I think, 2021 from being $100 limit drafted in the 70s to now being whatever the month's equivalent is for your lease. So say you're paying $1,300, you can do up to $1,300 on a month's rent in repairs and not pay the rent to the landlord, right? But ultimately, you're footing the bill for maintenance the landlord should have been doing, right? But more than that, collective deductions of rent, which have been like an experimental strategy for tenant unions like ours in other states, is there's no protections against it. And the reason why is because there's no formal statutory protections against retaliation for tenants organizing or doing things collectively with their neighbors. Something that we have seen in organizing is that tenants can do those deductions. They can take to class action suits that sometimes work, but anytime that they engage in any kind of collective action, retaliation is like the first thing that landlords or property management are looking at. And oftentimes because they know that they can call the bluff of tenants. Most tenants who are trying to take care of things with their neighbors are not confident enough, don't have the resources, don't have the support from their surrounding community to do it and withstand whatever retaliation comes to them, whether it be late fees or arbitrary charges on their digital accounts for paying rent through their portals,
So that
or other things. Yeah.
that can be considered a form of retaliation.
Yeah.
That just we have no way to fight.
And we got close. Back in the 2022 session, if I remember right, I think it was Daniel Pay and somebody else in the state house had put up a bill that was going to expand or amend the Landlord Tenant Act that would have included an anti-retaliation clause. For a brief time, that amendment was for properties exceeding 10 units, which I think was an idea of like protecting mom and pop landlords. But I don't know, there's a lot of properties that are under 10 units that the landlord owns 30 of them. So it doesn't really translate. But that got voted out of committee, got brought to the House, voted on, approved, and then it never got brought to a vote in the Senate. And since then, it's never been picked up. Retaliatory protections have not been brought to the state legislature since.
I want to, excuse me, I want to get to a couple examples really quickly.
Yeah.
So here's two examples I want to share
Yeah.
of Tulsa apartment complexes not doing what they should have done. Give me a second to find it here. Yeah, here it is. So, a few years ago, I covered a story about the Vista Shadow Mountain apartments. That just sounds horrible.
This is Vista Realtors.
Vista, I don't know if it's Vista Realtors, but I know the name of the specific
Yeah.
apartment complex in Tulsa was Shadow Mountain, which that sounds a little scary by itself.
Right.
But essentially, there were so many fire code violations, building maintenance code violations, complex wide.
Habitability.
Was an issue to where tenants they were given notice that they had to find a new place to live.
I think I remember the story.
And so people were scrambling, organizations were scrambling to try and provide temporary housing for a lot of these people.
It was also a Section 8 property, right?
I don't.
It was accepting vouchers, so it was mixed. You had some tenants there who were relying on vouchers.
I'd have to go back and check.
Yeah.
But essentially, it was through no fault of their own. They had to find a new place to live.
Right.
And then, more recently, just this year, Millennia Housing Management had to pay $67,000 in late water bills.
Right.
Or else they were in danger of being severely penalized to the point where their tenants would have to find a new place as well.
Yeah.
Now they did pay their water bill just a few days before the deadline.
I remember this. Right.
Yes.
Right.
And so both of these cases were here in Tulsa, and both instances of the landlords not doing what they need to be doing. A lot of
tenants
times
end up taking the whole brunt of it.
Right. And a lot of times it's out of state landlords too.
Right.
So my question, we know that Oklahoma has one of the shortest eviction timelines, 5 days, and one of the highest rates of evictions in any state. Both OKC and Tulsa have been at the top in the top 20 cities
eviction rates
in recent years.
Right.
And so my question is, Senate Democratic leader Julia Kurt.
Yes.
She has a bill, Senate Bill 1209, which would exclude weekends and holidays from the eviction schedule. So it's a way to extend the timeline without officially extending it.
Right.
Because I know last year they tried and that failed.
Right.
So this kind of seems like a roundabout way to do it. And she's gotten support from Republicans. It's passed out of committee.
I remember this.
And so this is an active bill that can be passed in session this year. It would extend the eviction timeline.
Yeah. Just got to bring it to a vote.
What are your thoughts? Does this go far enough? Would this be impactful?
Well, we got a lot of respect for Senator Kurt. We know how much work she's put in to try to improve housing policy, especially with tenant protections here in Oklahoma. I think if I remember right, she might have been one of the co-sponsors for trying to bring it to the Senate floor, that retaliation amendment in 2022. It's a start. Ultimately, the logic of it's very straightforward, right? If landlords and property management can take off on holidays, why can't tenants? Why did they get exempted from just linear time? Why do they have to be participating within their contracts? I mean, if landlords and property managers do not have to uphold their parts of a contract on holidays, why do tenants? So yeah, it's great. It's a start. I mean, I know that these are compromised positions that you just have to take in being a super minority in a state legislature like this. But it does make a difference. I mean, I have seen, time and again that tenants who try to cover back pay, go to family, go to whatever friends that they have, if they do have them, get, a couple of extra days makes a big difference in getting across the finish line of covering whatever, bills, if it is back pay, which is, the most common case. And that's, I think, where this is most consequential, versus an at fault eviction, as some separate violation of their lease agreements, but usually it's back pay. And
Yeah.
that, I mean, those days make a big difference.
Absolutely. And according to the eviction lab, black renters face far higher eviction rates than any other group. Now, in Tulsa, the city's own data, the Tulsa Equality Indicators,
Yeah.
a report that is done every year, shows that renters in majority black zip codes here in Tulsa County also face higher rates. And the disparity, this is something I'm working on an investigation of. I'm working on a 6-month investigation about this.
Okay.
And I'm really happy to be able to speak with you about this. The disparity has increased since 2018 when they first started collecting the data.
Wow.
So essentially, you know, black renters face more than 1.5, almost two
Right.
times the
Right.
rate of evictions,
Right.
or black majority zip codes. Now, during the pandemic, what you saw at on that report was
Right.
the disparity, between 2018 and 2020 was going up, but then in 2020 it
Plateaus.
plateaued because we
Eviction
had
moratorium.
the eviction moratorium.
Right.
We had just a groundswell of funding for rental assistance,
Right. Grants for legal support.
grants for legal support. But then as soon as the ARPA funds, but as soon as all of the COVID funding for that dried up, now the disparity has increased for black majority zip codes in Tulsa County beyond what it was in 2018.
Yeah.
And so
Yeah.
my question is, how do we reverse that? If
Mhm.
we see the disparity, if we see the disparities increasing, and cities and counties have limited options
Right.
to support renters.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, that's like, it's in the bones of America. I mean, I
Right.
think with what one of the things that's like, where we are at, in OTU right now is we're an affiliate of the Autonomous Tenant Union Network. It's a national network of tenant unions across the country. And one of the big like points of unity that we made sure that we wanted to include in our union constitution was that, race and social strata and demographics are fundamental components of how the housing system is structured and how it extracts value from working people's lives. Displacement is obviously the biggest phenomenon that expresses that through things like gentrification, right? Areas where you have historically black neighborhoods, historically brown communities, are prime targets today for a lot of real estate consolidation and large investment firms. And they've been for, prior to 2020, but especially so since then. I mean, I don't think that this conversation can be reduced to exclusively housing, because in a vacuum,
Right.
it doesn't really show the scale of how much the housing system is increasingly so year after year more the cornerstone of the American economy. I think the tariffs that we saw that came in last year showed increasing, astonishing reductions in profitability for sectors across the economy, except for data centers, right? AI, speculative investments. But the, tried and true speculative investment in any economy is real estate, because that is something that is not reliant on production. You're not investing in real estate to build something, to create value. It is held up by the bruised and bloody hands of tenants, because rents come out of wages. And that is ultimately how that extraction happens, in a racialized context even more so. I think I've got this book that we've been in the middle of working through, Abolish Rent.
Can you show it to the
I
camera?
can. I don't know if it'll be inverted, but yeah, it's a great book from a couple of the co-founders of
Perfect. There we go.
Los Angeles Tenants Union, and one of the things that they lay out in it is that about half of black households in America rent, and about a third of white households rent.
Mhm.
It's somewhere in between, I think, for Latino households or mixed households. They're somewhere in there. But that the if you have an economy that is more and more reliant upon rents to produce value, assets appreciating in real estate more than anything else, it's going to bear down harder and harder on working households of color. And I mean, I think that the implication for us is that the policy solutions to racism within housing are also like economic at the grand scale. Like you were mentioning earlier, how with Shadow Mountain, that property was derelict. There was not enough money going into the maintenance and upkeep of the property. They couldn't even keep up with their bills, and yet somehow they don't have to really face a lot of consequences in their personal lives. In their professional lives, they lose an asset, right? They maybe have to sell the property. They don't
That's a
get
good point.
evicted.
That's a good point.
They don't have to be brought to court. And I think when you compare it to other businesses, like if you run a gas station and go broke, you're not really affecting people's lives that severely. But if you're a landlord and go broke, that is people's homes that we're talking about. Housing, if it is continued to be treated as a sector of the economy that is just for profit, if it is not considered exempt from the standard expectations of how a business should be run on a legal standard or financial standard, if it is not given some expectation of being better than that, we're going to continue to run into these problems year after year.
I want to play devil's advocate.
Yeah, that's the right way to do it.
We all know someone who's a landlord, right?
Yeah.
I have an aunt
Yeah.
who's a landlord.
Right.
I have a couple of friends who have maybe an Airbnb rental properties.
Mm-hmm.
What's your reaction to the argument that, look, as a landlord, I'm providing
Yeah.
housing.
Yeah.
As a landlord,
Yeah.
you are choosing to
Right.
enter into this contract.
Right.
I'm not forcing you to enter into this contract. You are choosing to decide
Yeah.
you're going to pay this much at this time each month for this property.
Right.
And so why is it my fault as a landlord if you have back rent and need to be evicted? How do I pay my bills if I'm not collecting my rent?
Right. Well, I think it starts with this idea of primitive accumulation.
Primitive accumulation.
Yeah.
Okay.
If you have value that you can put into the economy through an investment, through getting a commercial loan for owning a property, what really matters is who's ultimately paying for that bill. Who's paying for the construction of a housing unit or a home, right? If it's a apartment complex, condos or otherwise, who's paying for the mortgage once it's actually operating and being rented out? If you buy a property and you own it outright, you have equity in the thing. I think the expectations are a little bit different for you versus if you have an outstanding loan, probably to some degree. But like you said, being a housing provider, the key word in there is provision. Like, who provided it? Did you build the housing? Did the bank finance it? Who's paying for that? Who paid for those bills? And I think, coming back to the big picture economic thing, if that is the way that people, cover their bills at the end of the day, it's really hard to be moralistic about it and say that it's a personal failing. I mean, this economy is more and more, the economy is made up of people who are forced to be in a certain position within the housing system and either be a winner or loser, and to make that personal choice of being a winner in the sense of owning property, being a property manager, being a realtor, being a developer. It's not it You kind of have to. People ultimately have to pay their bills. And so I think that that's a big thing with this, is that as a tenant organizer and as a tenants union, I think, and OTU, we think that generally to be a landlord is sometimes inevitable in this system. It is a personal choice, and that maybe you could do something else, but What matters more is the system at large,
Mm-hmm.
and also the personal choices I think that you make in how you run it. We also know plenty of people who are tenants who have good landlords,
Mm-hmm.
who have people who are generally like on top of their things. They're up with their lease. They're not being exaggerative and increasing the rent year after year.
Right.
I've got siblings in Chicago, and in the last 4 years, what they've generally seen is that the rent that they have to pay more year after year is a little bit more. Like last year, my siblings both went up. One of them went up 75, another one 100. But then in 2021, one of them went up 25, and the other went up none. And it just depends on, I think, really how you run it.
Fair
Does
enough.
that answer your question?
Fair enough. I think so. I guess you're saying that you're not against the existence of landlords, but you want a more equal playing field.
I think the existence of landlords are inevitable in this economy,
Mm.
and that what matters more is changing the economy to where landlords are not necessary.
Oh.
I mean, if the economy is reliant upon speculation, asset appreciation, if we're no longer reliant on like the production of, heavy industry that, a lot of people associate with like New Deal era American economics, then of course there's going to be plenty of landlords, right? But there's serious economic changes that would have to happen for landlords to not exist, because right now that's the main way that people pay their bills.
Well, I wanna get into what those serious economic changes
Yeah,
could look like.
yeah.
Before we do, I want to go back to the history because just I wasn't gonna bring this up, but I'm gonna keep it real.
Hmm.
It's my podcast. I can
Yeah,
say what
yeah,
I want to
yeah.
say, so I'm gonna keep it real. I am someone who has tried to organize
Yeah.
my tenants
Really?
at different complexes in the
Okay.
past,
Okay.
right? And the struggle that I came across was when I was I was at one property for 3 years, right?
Uh-huh.
And so what I realized was there was so much turnover year after year that it was difficult to form relationships with my
Very
neighbors.
hard.
And that's
Yeah.
where
Yeah.
organizing starts. Like I could put a flyer on everyone's door, like, "Hey, let's meet at on Sunday at
But a
5."
stranger's a different story than a friend.
Yeah, no one's gonna pick up that flyer. I don't even
Yeah.
pick up the pizza flyer that they leave on those
Oh
doors.
my gosh.
And so I
Yeah.
realized that
Yeah.
I was still fighting. Now listen, I was emailing my landlord back and forth, and they were
Uh-huh.
responding. Like
Mhm.
I'll give you one story because
Yeah,
people
yeah.
like stories.
I know
So
they
I was
do.
at this one property, 51st and Yale, South Tulsa and Midtown, I guess. And there was one time where this security guard,
Mm-hmm.
the apartment security guard, was banging on my door at like 12 o'clock at night.
Yeah.
He was looking for somebody up to no good.
Yeah.
He got a call, I guess, but he had come to the wrong door.
Yeah.
So I crack open the door at 12 o'clock at night. I'm like, who is this? I'm like, my dog is here. So if you're trying something, let's go.
Watch out.
Um,
Yeah.
but he's basically telling me that, he got reports that there were a bunch of like broken credit cards and money and drugs like just sprawled out over the floor.
On your apartment.
And I'm like, first of all, who would be able to call and tell you about that unless they
Yeah.
can see into the apartment?
Yeah.
And second of all, bro, you can peek through right now and see that's not the case
Yeah.
here. So he wanted to enter my apartment fully.
Right.
I don't know who you are.
Right.
I don't know if you actually are a security guard or some random
Just
person.
intimidation, right?
And I've gotten no notice from
Yeah.
my apartment complex.
Yeah.
So I told him, you're not coming in.
Uh-huh.
And there was this back and forth. Eventually he left. But I felt uncomfortable.
Yeah.
Like the fact that could happen.
Yeah.
And so I notified my apartment complex the next day. And at first they tried to downplay it, but I just kept letting them know that like, actually I'm a journalist and I can blow this story up if something's not done about it. And that was when they actually fired the guy.
Wow.
They fired the guy.
Yeah.
And replaced him. But I say that to say a lot of times we're on our own.
Yeah.
And it's depending on our own resources
Right.
of whether we can fight those battles or not.
It's yeah. Yeah.
And when it comes to Black people, I feel like because we are more likely to be renters, because we are more likely to be evicted, we should be at the forefront of
Organizing.
but we're
Or
not.
yeah, right. Well, I mean, I don't know, man. I'll tell you, most of my experience with older Black women, grandmas, mothers, they're usually the ones that are the smartest in organizing
Mm.
situations. Um, there's a couple things there. I mean, first off, Oklahoma City did a housing affordability study back in, I think, 2018, consulted with some group out of Colorado, I think. And one of the things that they came away with was that prior to 2008, the average occupancy period for a tenant in a unit in Oklahoma City was a little over 6 years.
Mm.
After 2020, it was a little over 2. So a 4-year decline.
Mm.
Obviously, these are averages, but a pretty significant drop off in the average residency period, I think, is the term you'd want to use for that in Oklahoma City, and that's across the country. Um, if the um, if the turnover of tenants is that frequent, you just can't get past the point of saying hello. You can't get past the point of being acquainted. And, I think that's like one of the biggest misunderstandings with organizing is that like organizing can really start anywhere. It can happen very quickly, abruptly. It can come from somebody with a lot of motivation. But the thing that sustains it, that keeps it lasting and resilient through examples of like intimidation, like you were talking about, is those relationships. You can do a lot on your own though as well. I mean, the main 3 ways that we think strategically about an organizing campaign in terms of the kind of approach of what we're trying to do is you have financial pressure, you have legal pressure, and you have social pressure. Social pressure really ruins people's reputations. Naming and shaming is like a very important thing for when people do not have any other structure of accountability, like when they have equity outright on a property and they don't have any mortgages that they have to keep up with, or they're well standing within the community and have a big reputation. Some of the biggest landlords in the state, in the country, are also some of the biggest philanthropists. Philanthropists. That's a different word.
That tracks.
Yeah.
That makes sense.
Yeah, and I think I mean, I think the only other thing that I would say on that is that like, you know, organizing is an evaluation of like risk. What is the risk of organizing?
Mm.
What are we facing when we don't versus when we do? And doing that formula on your own inevitably puts you in a position of where organizing is way more of a risk than staying on your own. But when that formula changes to a collective scale, when you're looking at, okay, what is possible with organizing at a collective scale, that equation changes. Risk becomes a little bit more seriously possible when you have 30 people that can be doing something with you rather than just one.
Right. Because when I was sending those emails, I sure was afraid of like, okay, let me make sure I pay my rent on time so I can't give them any reason to blow me off.
No excuses.
Or to retaliate.
Yeah.
Like I got to make sure everything is in shape. I do have a theory.
Yeah.
I do have a theory because a theory of why Black folks are not more involved in organizing around
Housing,
but also in general, why we're not more involved in the. I gotta say this carefully because there's so many Black progressives and Black leftists. I'm one of them.
Yeah.
But what I'm trying to say is there is a divide in trust, and I think that goes back generations.
Right.
And I want to bring up one more historical context.
Right.
From the Oklahoma Historical Society,
Right.
which talks about how the Oklahoma Renters Union in 1909, kind of what birthed out of the tenant farmers organizing.
Yeah.
Recruitment was difficult due to a few factors. Discrimination by landlords, with many refusing to rent land to tenants who were members of the organization. But also, the Renters Union themselves would not allow African American or indigenous people to join these unions.
I didn't know that.
And so even though Oklahoma had one of the most impactful, the largest socialist movement at the turn of the century, Black people.
It was a white movement.
It was a white movement.
Yeah. Right.
And so it's like 100 years later, y'all are telling us to join you, but we still got scars from 100 years ago.
Yeah.
of when y'all didn't let our grandparents and great grandparents in. So how do we bridge that divide? How do
Right.
we get that trust back to build that power
Yeah.
of organizing
That
collectively?
that represents the racialized tenant class. It's not
Mhm.
just white tenants. It's mostly not white.
Right.
Yeah. I this is a bit of a shame point for us because I do think this is something that I've been wanting us to go through and do a deeper archive into with ORU and also the early sharecroppers movements. Um, I have a better sense of the tenant farmer movement in the context of Alabama
Mm.
through Robin D.G. Kelly's book Hammer and Hoe. I don't know if you've ever heard of this.
Mm.
He was a student of Ruthie Gilmore at UCLA. Wrote that I think as his dissertation maybe and turned it into a book. But it kind of lays out how the black tenant farmers, especially in the Black Belt portions of Alabama, from the 20s onwards, really made up the social base of what became the civil rights movement. And more importantly,
Fannie Lou Hamer.
yeah, Fannie Lou Hamer. Oh my gosh, there's like a bunch of names that I'm forgetting right now. But the point of it is that like when white activists and organizers came to Alabama, their conceptions of organizing were almost entirely upon economic demands.
Mm-hmm.
And what they encountered with black tenant farmers was that um, civil rights, criminalization, and state violence, the KKK or the sheriff's office, um, those were the primary demands of what people were facing. And that's something that we see firsthand with organizing today, too. I mean, trying to organize with Black and Latino tenants here in Oklahoma, it is a big thing that we come across that like discrimination is at the front of their mind of what they're facing because it actually is what they're facing. In one of the campaigns that we saw, this is actually a really good example of one of the questions you were asking about. We had a campaign where the property manager was refusing to provide lease agreements in English to a majority Spanish speaking property where most of the households were English second language or didn't speak English fluently, didn't read it, even more so, were given leases in English. And then, when a court ordered injunction against rent until gas lines were fixed failed to provide notice to the Spanish speaking tenants in Spanish that they were included in this,
Mm-hmm.
mostly, or even more so for the tenant households who were undocumented, saying that because they were not citizens, they were not protected under the injunction, that they still would have to pay rent and that they would be evicted and ICE would be called on them if they did not pay rent
Wow.
under an injunction. And eventually there was some hand slapping done by the judge, but that's something that we see that all the time. Is discrimination is a tool used for intimidation. I'm sure there's a reason why they picked a security guard versus just the office lady to visit your unit.
Right. Like if it was some old white lady that you thought had a bunch
Yeah.
of credit cards and drugs on her floor, would you be coming to her house
No.
with your badge at 12 o'clock at night?
No.
I don't know.
Probably not.
But
Yeah.
But so we have to, I think, acknowledge the divide, acknowledge the historical context,
Right.
because I think that informs what worked, what didn't work,
Yeah.
and how we can learn from the past.
Yeah.
you
Yeah,
know?
absolutely. Yeah, we can't just make you can't just make demands on rent being down. You can't just make demands on maintenance being covered. You also have to ask the landlord to not be a bigot.
Mm.
That's right at the top of that list too.
Well, Baron, I feel like you have educated me a lot. There's a lot I want to read. I wanted to ask you if there were any final thoughts you wanted to leave with people about Oklahoma Tenants Union.
Yeah, yeah. I can make it quick. So right now we have a little over 20 organizing members across Oklahoma City, Stillwater, and Tulsa. We are actively in a position of where we are trying to build our local networks, essentially at the geographic level of cities and counties, and organizing our first tenant associations. Um, the We've developed a lot of Oklahoma specific resources for organizing. We have an entire training program for people who are looking to organize either where they live or organizing in the surrounding community. But every bit of time that somebody can commit to an organization like this, even like 30 minutes a month, makes a huge difference. Because just to get into it briefly, in an organizing campaign, what happens first with a group like us? somebody reaches out asking for help. That person has to go through an intake call. We have to figure out if that actually is something that a situation where they want to organize, or if we want to defer them to like legal resources because they're going to go through the courts. There has to be trainings, canvassing of the property, research on the landlord, figuring out which neighbors are actually down to talk, and providing that support so that they can ultimately be, in the driver's seat of their own organizing. And none of that has to be done by the same person. The number of times where I've come across a situation where I'm like, literally anybody could be doing what I'm doing right now. That's the very reason why I think that anybody who, doesn't feel like they know a lot about organizing, knows nothing, but they care about their neighbors, they care about housing, they recognize how consequential it is to people's lives. Join us. You can do something very small and make a very consequential impact nonetheless.
So where can they go to find you?
We've got a link tree
Sweet.
that we can promote and include on the details. You can sign up through our membership application form, and I've actually got some resources that I think we still have public about like first conversations with neighbors, how you move from getting acquainted to actually like having the first conversations about actually organizing, about how to take the approach of like relationship building in that context with neighbors. And so, if you don't want to join, but you want to learn more, we've got things that you can see too.
Baron with Oklahoma Tenants Union, thank you so much for joining In Depth with Dion. Appreciate you.
Thank you.